maybe one guy I'd like to see come out of retirement. A man that I've talked about for the last two episodes.
You're grasping at straws.
His name is Brian Ching, and he was an absolute, what's the right way to say this? He was the cog that allowed Houston to make their incredible 2006 MLS playoff run. We've already talked at length about the Houston Dynamo's 2006 MLS regular season, with a big focus on the man just mentioned, Brian Ching. So I'll likely keep this to be a relatively quick recap, and I'll just focus on their playoff run in 2006. And if you want to hear more about Houston, check out our last two MLS History Retold episodes. Check out my parts specifically because I will be covering a lot of Houston's regular season in their first inaugural season. So the team, as Andrew mentioned, managed to finish second in the Western Conference, therefore earning them a 2 seed in the playoffs and a first round matchup with Chivas USA, one of the new boys from last season. A much improved season for Chivas this year, likely because they stopped playing FIFA, sees the side no longer an easy win. The playoff format for the conference semis, as Andrew mentioned, sees the affair as two games, home and away for each side, with the aggregate goal difference being the deciding factor. Game 1 was at the Home Depot Center in Carson, California. Chivas would bring their A game and take a 2-goal advantage by the 68th minute, which Houston would not be able to overcome. However, that man, Brian Ching, would score an all-important goal in the 75th minute to make the aggregate 2-1. Going back home only down 1 goal was great for the team, as they would certainly be able to turn this around. At Robertson Stadium in Houston, Texas, the Dynamo would look to complete the turnaround, and they would get some help from an unlikely source. Game 1's game-winning scorer, Juan Francisco Palencia, would get 2 yellow cards in 2 minutes after he tried to slap Houston's Ricardo Clark early in the second half. With the man advantage, things started to turn Houston's way. In the 64th minute, Brad Davis would score a penalty to level the tie, but Houston was not done. Why play for extra time if you can win it right now? And win it now they did. The 93rd minute rolls around. The clock is ticking closer and closer to extra time. There may only be enough time for one more attack on goal for Houston. De Rosario, plays a cross into the box from the left flank, which is then popped back up into the air after the header from Eddie Robinson is headed straight into the ground, and is now a loose ball in the box. Who else but the legend himself, Brian Ching, would find the loose ball and head the ball past the surprisingly hairy Brad Guzan to win the tie for Houston in the dying seconds. Next round is a single elimination game, and as Andrew discussed, since FC Dallas was defeated by the Colorado Rapids, the Houston Dynamo were the higher seed remaining, meaning the game was played in Houston, a massive advantage for them. However, Jovan Kirovski would put a dent into that advantage within 4 minutes as he opened the scoring and gave Colorado an early lead. It would not take long, however, for Houston to turn it on and get right back into it, as Paul Dalglish would score twice in the 10th and 21st minute to give Houston the lead. A lead which would not be relinquished as a lead which would not be relinquished was even furthered through a 71st minute goal from Brian Mullen. Certainly an easier round for Houston than the previous. The MLS Cup final saw the Dynamo take on a very talented New England Revolution side, who finished second in the East and knocked out Supporter Shield winners DC United. The Revs would field some big names like Shalry Joseph, Taylor Twellman, Michael Parkhurst, and Clint Dempsey. The Dynamo had big names of their own, looking to make history in Houston, such as Dwayne De Rosario, Brad Davis, and of course, Brian Ching. Despite all those big names, the game went entirely scoreless in regular time, meaning that we were off to extra time. And then if it was still level after that, penalties will decide the championship. In the 113th minute, New England's Cano Smith picks up a loose ball and starts booking it towards the Houston goal. A fantastic run by him leads multiple Houston players to commit to stopping him, meaning that one of the most lethal players in league history was left in loads of space, which is a big mistake. Taylor Twellman collects the pass with nobody in front of him and calmly slots the ball past the diving Onstad to give New England the lead. Luckily for Houston, this is not a golden goal rule, so they have 5 minutes or so to try and get back into this game. As if the man Brian Ching would need all that time. Before the TV cameras even finished showing Twellman after his goal, we've kicked off and the ball is crossed into the box from Brian Mullen and found the head of Brian Ching to immediately put the game back level. The crowd in Frisco, Texas goes crazy as just when it looked like hope was lost, Houston was right back in it. The score remained level for the rest of extra time, meaning we were off to penalties. In between the sticks are two of the greatest to bear the gloves in MLS, Matt Reese for New England and Pat Onstad for Houston. It is not going to be easy to get many past these two. Houston's first two kickers, Kelly Gray and Stuart Holden, both rifled their shots past Reese. On the New England side, Shalry Joseph did the same with his. Then stepped up Matt Reese himself as the number 2 taker in the MLS Cup final. And he delivered. Matt Reese put the pen upper 90 to beat Onstad and make it level again. De Rosario would score his next penalty for Houston, just beating Reese into the bottom left corner. Next was Pat Noonan for New England. He took a short run up, but put the shot over the bar. Houston with the advantage. Reese needed to step up or New England was really in trouble here. Next up was future Houston legend Brad Davis, who saw his pen get saved by Matt Reese. New England can make it back level. New England can make it back level again. The extra time goal scorer, Taylor Twellman, stepped up and blasted one past Onstad to level things again. Round 5 for Houston would see who else but Brian Ching step up. And he did what he does best, be clutch. The stutter step run up sees his shot just get past the diving Reese and give Houston the advantage. It was score or go home for New England now. And up stepped Jay Heaps. He runs up and hits a slow shot on the ground to Onstad's right, which is promptly saved by Onstad, meaning Houston have now won MLS Cup in its inaugural season. Unsurprisingly, Brian Ching is the MLS Cup MVP, and arguably MVP of Houston's season, as he was insanely massive across the entire season from day one, which we talked about 2 episodes ago, until the last kick for Houston of the season in the penalty kick shootout. A side had not won MLS Cup in its inaugural season since Chicago Fire in 1998. Correct me if I'm wrong. And none have done it since. But the story is not done yet. There may be a part 2 next season, but you'll have to listen in to a future episode if you want to hear us talk about that.
Nice little teaser.
Of course. I mean, it may be like 4 episodes when they get to that one, so nobody's going to remember the teaser.
You hit a really good Metro name, Cano Smith. Cano Smith up there on Bum of the Decade.
Oh boy.
For Red Bull, the worst player on the worst team of the 2000 to 2009 decade. So he comes in, I believe, in the top 10. I think he's top 5 as well on that list. So that was fun. That brought back some good memories.
I'm glad I can bring back the good memories for you.
You know, of course, a part of that New England team. So he does, you know, he puts in a shift for New England and then gets to the Red Bulls. And what happens when he gets to the Red Bull? Becomes a bum. What a shock.
Jaime Moreno too.
Jaime Moreno, same deal. I know. How did I turn this into a Red Bull themed episode? I don't know. I just have that magic.
It always ends up that way.
I have that magic in me, don't I?
Yeah, some call it magic, some call it, I don't know, an issue.
I think what's really again, and the longer we talk about the early days Houston, the more it's always going to keep coming back. That Houston team is just San Jose and Orange. What would have happened if they didn't leave? Mm-hmm. I keep thinking about that every time you talk about it.
It's credit. I know, yeah, obviously we talk about Houston like, oh, they won their inaugural season, and you could always put an asterisk on it because it's not like a true expansion team. It's just a team that moved. But I feel like some credit has to be given here because I mean every player on that team picked up, moved to a completely new part of the country. It's a completely different like weather environment. Obviously, like, maybe not all of their families came with them. Like it's a whole new situation for them, and they just did not skip a beat. Went from Support Shield winners to MLS Cup champions. Like they did such an amazing job with the move to Houston.
That is totally fair as well, and I'll give you that. I will totally give you that. I think that they had an easier time transitioning, though, considering that they were. I think if you take the expansion team tag off of them and just call them like a relocated team, you don't even need to put an asterisk on it, but like if you took that and applied it, I think it makes everything a little bit better. But to call them like, oh, the best expansion team in history when they were really just relocated as another team, in a different color. I think
Yeah.
that's what kind of gets me is people think it's like a brand new team and it never was. So
Yeah, I
uh,
try to stray away from calling them an expansion side because I know that they're new, but I mean, technically, they didn't even expand the league, so it's hard to call them an expansion side. They really just kept the same number of teams.
yeah, yeah, I mean that's fair.